of the education sector in the country. And joining us on set right now is Dr. Eliud Situma, who is an educationist, a lawyer, and also the executive director of Trinlab Consulting Limited. And also still on my right is Moses K. Rono. He is the student leader, or the president actually, St. Paul's University. Gentlemen, welcome to studio tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right. And now, straight to it, as we had mentioned earlier, we are looking at the state of the education sector in the country. Maybe just to start with you, Daktari, by the look of things in the country, is the education sector headed the right direction or otherwise?
Yeah, thank you very much, Theo and the viewers. You see, education is next to the heart of many, and especially myself as an educationist. Kenya is one of the highest ranking in terms of the education system that we put in place. And you look at exactly where we've come from, you have to look at the historical background up to where we are, looking at the milestone that we've encountered in terms of education reforms. I could say that we've been on the right path. However, there are a few teething problems, especially with the competence-based curriculum that was introduced recently. And I think in our discussion, we are likely to delve deep into that.
All right. Teething problems just based on the competency-based curriculum that was introduced recently. Let's also hear from Moses. Moses, you are a student right now at the university at a tertiary level. So by the look of things, as you have been growing up to where you are, when you compare, is the state of the education in the country right now headed the right direction or otherwise?
Well, I think we are on the right track, but there are some spaces and gaps that we need to fill in order to have people who are well-rounded. I think from the data and statistics of those that have graduated or gone through the system, and the very many that are still in the system, if you compare the statistics, and you will see that there are some people who have benefited from it because perhaps the system favored them, but there are very many that were not favored by the system. And so I'll say somehow it is headed in the right direction. It has served its purpose, but there are some spaces that there are gaps that we need to fill by virtue of analyzing the current trends in the world. So it's kind of outdated, but we have space to change.
All right. So, Daktari, you have also shared similar sentiments with Moses. We started well, but we got somewhere, and it's like now we are headed not in the very right direction. Daktari, you've mentioned of the competency-based curriculum, and Moses has mentioned of emerging trends. Let's start with the competency-based curriculum, Daktari. What do you think we missed in terms of getting the competency-based curriculum? Having in mind, we benchmarked with some of the great countries like Finland, I want to believe. We had stakeholders who went to Finland and they brought the system to the country. When we say things like CBC, what do you think we didn't hit right with CBC?
Yeah, thank you very much, and that's really a good question. I think it's very important to put things in context. That number one, that when you want to analyze any education system in the world, you need to look at it from both the quantitative and the qualitative perspective. The bit that we've been so much inclined to, we've been inclined to quantitative aspect, looking at how many people have transited from one stage to another, how many people have scored an A and etc. However, looking at the best system in the world, is that they focus more on the qualitative aspect. And by the qualitative aspect, I imply that are we introducing an education system that is likely to attract international students? Are we introducing an education system that focuses on skills and competence, but at the same time, it doesn't do away with the knowledge acquisition? These are two important things, and I really need to emphasize this, that how much we are introducing every time we have a new education reform, one of the things that we want to cure, and always, starting from independence up to date, remember after independence, there was the Media Commission around 1964. You come down, fast forward, you get around 1981 when there was the introduction of now the proposal to introduce the 844 system. And the major problem was that there was a disconnect between the education system in that place and the labor market.
Right.
So when you look at those two things, the question would be now, to try and answer your question, is what could be the issue with the current CBC? I want to tell you that CBC is really modeled well. It is on the right track. However, it is about the economics bit of it. What do I imply by economics bit of it? That you need finances to roll out CBC in the right way. We are talking about a system that involves so many other stakeholders, just besides looking at the student and the teacher. We are looking at the household, we are looking at the government funding, and we are looking at all a manner of stakeholders coming together. So there are experts who did valuation, went out and say, now that we've been having an 844 system that has been specifically focusing on examination and talking about how many people have been able to score this grade, how many have we churned out, to a problem-solving kind of system where we're looking at, can these people now focus on entrepreneurship, that they could have problem-solving skills. However, to get these, you need resources. And the economics should be that looking at, before they roll out this system, was the government, did the government really listen to the experts in terms of the economics bit of it? That are we able to really fund this kind of education system? And that's the problem. That's why we are actually in a crisis. We are in a crisis because, and I'll mention all the stakeholders, because the teachers, we don't have enough teachers being employed. Number two, we are in a crisis because we don't have a sustainability plan of funding it. Just recently, I think a few weeks ago, the funding by USAID, there's this literacy plan called Tusome, which they were funding about 3 billion to Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. It's been now stopped. So what happens? What happens is the literacy program, where a textbook, it was 1-to-1 ratio. The KICD could get how the textbooks go out and give to our learners. Now, once it stops, it goes back to the exchequer. The question is, does the exchequer, does Kenyan government have the money to really fund this CBC? So that we are not only looking at the quantitative, but we are looking at the quality bit of it. So that what we are doing is the quality of learning, does it commensurate with what was envisioned when the curriculum was being put in place? Then most importantly, before I allow Rona to make a few comments, most importantly is that when we talk about financing in relation to CBC, it also be important to ask ourselves that do the political class, remember most of the time you've seen on other media houses, when people are invited, they talk about the government is at fault, and those people could be even members of parliament. So you ask, who is the government? The government comprises of 3 arms. It comprises of the judiciary, it comprises of the executive, and it comprises of the legislature. However, it is now the prerogative of the executive to ensure implementation of this program. But they cannot implement without listening to the experts. So ultimately, where the problem is with CBC is the political class has refused to listen to the advice. Like, this program could be rolled out in stages. Remember, this is a socio-economic right as provided for within the Article 43 of our Constitution. That implies that there's a gradual expectation and of the common mwananchi of how the system is supposed to be rolled. But when you want to roll it out, so that you become popular, we are bound to fail.
All right.
Yes.
Quite insightful sentiments there from Dr. Eliud Tituma. And maybe to you, Moses, let's touch on a bit that is so close to heart to you as a student leader. Now, in terms of also reforms in the academic or in the education sector, Daktari has really touched on the competency-based curriculum. Now, you as a student leader, come May 3rd this year, we will be celebrating 2 years anniversary since the launch of the new university funding model. However, just 2 weeks ago, we saw the government revert back to the old model of HELB. Now, even when it was being launched, we saw students and even you guys, student leaders, take to the streets to address and raise concerns about the new funding model. Still the same question, maybe I will ask Daktari, I have asked Daktari, what was the new university funding model a hit or a miss?
It was a great miss. One, I think we cannot afford to be political about education. And education is a very important thing. If I'm a product of education, and were it not for education, perhaps we'll not be in the places that we are right now. And so seeing this and seeing that with the new funding model, and there is a lot of things that are not really clear, meaning there are very many young people who want to go through the education sector, but cannot because they do not have the funds to do that. On a daily basis, we interact with students who are still suffering from the same. I come from a private institution, but there are students who are placed in private institution. But again, the amount of money that they are supposed to pay versus the income, the household income, they are not able to afford this education. And so many of them are opting to drop out. And so if these people are dropping out and education was meant to solve the illiteracy problem that is there in the country, then I think as an education sector, that's a very big miss and we're headed in the wrong direction. There is a photo that was circulating sometimes back of this child who was looking at the graduates of a certain university. And as she was staring at them, you could see the desire to at least one day get to that place. But with a new funding model or a funding model that ensures somehow that this education becomes more expensive, then you are rest assured that this person might not really achieve the goal of that. We've been having several meetings with student leaders, some internal, that is for our institution, and most of them are citing that because of how wrong this thing is and punitive to the sense that they cannot, the parents are struggling to raise the fees. I think initially we were paying around 24,700, and we still, with the 24,700, there are students who could not afford the 24,700. And then now they're expected to pay 50,000. And I think that is a very great miss. If the education sector is meant to address the problems that are there in the country, I think with this kind of model, then we are producing more problems for a country. Because if they are illiterate, they'll resort to other measures of raising funds for themselves or ensuring that they stay alive. And if they do so, then that means we'll have very many robbers on the streets. And because they are not educated and they have not gone through the correct system. And looking at other countries that give loans to students, give bursaries and scholarship, if there's a certain, I think, law that was passed, not passed, but brought to Parliament concerning if all these funds is consolidated and now goes towards funding the education, I think we are going to have more solutions to the problems that we have as a nation. Because a woke generation is going to ensure that we do not fall for mediocrity and crown clowns. And the moment we have very many people who are not educated, then you are going to have a nation or a generation that people are going to be celebrating clowns on the streets. And so I believe if we go in this direction of making the education sector more expensive, then we are not going to get anywhere. There was a statement by one of the leaders, I won't mention who, problems of a system once rolled it out, but it has been 2 years. I think we can already see there are very many problems and solutions.
All right. And those are very insightful sentiments. Daktari, maybe just a touch on what he has mentioned is he said the new funding model is not really he's actually termed it as a miss, as we'd say. Now, looking at the means testing instrument that were used to place students in, I understand, a number of bands or a number of categories. What would you say, Daktari, is the workability of this means testing instruments that maybe you feel has made the new funding model be a miss?
Yeah, thank you, and I totally agree with Rono that any education system that is progressive, it has those key indicators. There's research and innovation. It should appeal across the cultural, but most importantly is affordability and accessibility. Those are the most important component of any given education system. And I already alluded to this, that in Kenya, where we are, we've had two constitutional dispensations, the constitution after independence and the constitution of Kenya in 2010. One of the unique things about the constitution of Kenya 2010, there are three or four. Number one, that it introduced a devolved system of governance. Number two, it reduced imperial presidency. And most importantly, it introduced the Bill of Rights, that is the old Chapter 4. One of the Bill of Rights is that everyone, according to Article 43, which I already mentioned, that every person has a right to education. If you read it together with Article 53, it also says that every child has a right to free and basic education. Now, look at this new model. And for the sake of the viewers, I'll need to break it down a bit. But this is, we have stakeholders, we have the government, and this is what the government has put in place. The government put in place the university fund. It has put in place Higher Education Loans Board. It has put in place the Kenya University and Colleges Placement Service. Those are three pillars that the government based on in terms of looking at how do we ensure that this funding model is working. Now, the means testing instrument that you talked about, I think it was envisioned to really address the issue about scholarship that was specifically on the university, to focus on the scholarship for the needy students. Then number two, there's the HELB that specifically was supposed to churn out loans. Then there is the household contribution, where that every parent is expected to give out a certain amount of money. But Theo, let me tell you this, and the viewers, that we also forget that within all the stakeholders I've mentioned, we also have the student. And for this matter, we have a student in a public university, we have student in private university. And all these, they have what we call a legitimate expectation, based that this is already enshrined in the Constitution. So every student is expecting that the government of the day must fund education. We cannot have two things about it. So whatever kind of instrument they introduce, ultimately, we should not even be talking about a loan. We should not be talking about scholarship. We should be talking about a grant, that the students should be given grant. But the catch here is it sustainable? And that's the bit that we talk about the economics. Is it sustainable? Because as we have this group coming into the university, there's another one coming the next day. What the conversation that we need to be talking about here is now, how do we make this education affordable, accessible, and also sustainable, so that we don't get in a crisis within every cycle? So you look at, for example, the means testing, where that you are supposed to look at the household and see whether the father is working, the mother is working, and etc. Look at this. They are testing this at the point of admission of the student in the university. They are not testing how the parents were doing when you were high school. If a parent was working today, tomorrow, God forbid, he has stopped working, just even a day after a student has applied, what happens? It implies whatever category the student will be placed in, they will not be able to afford education. So what have we done? We have killed the dream of this young man, this young lady, and everyone who is relying on the education system. What happened to the old model that we are reverting to? There was a block capitation. Block capitation where every student, you are allocated this amount of money. But now the problem also comes, there's another key stakeholder we are calling the university. The university, because of how the economy is, each course has a different cost. So assuming you are doing medicine, for instance, the cost of doing medicine could be higher compared to another course. So if the government continue to give a block capitation, it implies that the university could not operate at its optimum. Failing to operate at optimum, it affects the lecturers in place, it affects the workers who are there because they are not paid their salaries in good time. They are not able to meet the statutory deductions on their pay slips. So ultimately, the student might say, yes, the government has paid, given me a scholarship, has given me all this money. But at the end of the day, the university is suffering. So how do you strike a balance? What we are saying is the government has to go back to use data correctly. At Trinlab Consulting Limited, we don't only believe in data. We believe in strategic information, where you transfer this data to strategic information that you can be used to make correct decisions. So for the government to make the correct decision is, can we look at all these instruments that we are putting in place? And I thank God because the Kenya Human Rights Commission went ahead and the matter was in court and there was an order to bar the model. Yeah. Reason being, there was no public participation. That's number one. Then number two, it was very expensive. It was abstract. No one could understand how they could arrive at band 1, band 2, band 3. And the constitution is also very clear. You can never discriminate people. So that the discrimination to the extent that this student feels, oh my goodness, now I'm the poorest in this system. So what we are saying is that unless we have a very courageous and candid discussion about this, we are heading the wrong direction. It's better we revert back to the old model, ensure that our students, they are in school, their legitimate expectation is met.
All right, Daktari, thank you so much for that. Maybe to you, Moses, Daktari says it's better we revert to the old funding model. Do you share the same sentiments, just briefly, because we should be winding up?
Well, coming from a private institution, I can say with the old system, there was still errors that can be corrected. And one of the errors was the government could not pay the money to this private institution, or the amount of money that they are paying eventually do not get to this institution. And so I believe when we go to the old system, we need to ensure that such gaps that were in the old system are fixed, because again we'll get ourselves back into the same hole of the government is owing too much money to private institutions.
All right, and Moses, still to you, there's a comment that is coming on our platform. Someone is saying, ask Moses, because student leaders have been championing for free education all the way from primary level to tertiary level. And the person who is asking this question is asking, is this possible? But even Daktari will come to you. You tell us even whether having free education in the current state of the country, is it possible, Moses? Briefly.
I think it's possible if all, sometimes the custodians of our taxes, the custodians of everything that is collected in the country, sometimes they do mess and invest in the wrong things. If all these funds, scholarship that in different, we have CDF, I don't know, perhaps the governor has their own fund and scholarship. So if everything is consolidated, and perhaps we might be able to achieve a free education in the country.
Great. And to you, Daktari, what would you say, or what would you answer? What would be your answer to this question? Is it possible to have free education all the way? Because student leaders and university students, this is what they have been calling upon the President, Dr. William Ruto, to do: implement free education all the way. Is this possible?
Theo, it's very possible. It's very, very possible. All we need to do is to have a very candid discussion about can we allow the experts to run the education system? Can we use the information we have to make education predictable? Can we seal all the loopholes that exist in terms of corruption? With that, yes, it is possible.
Great. And lastly, as we wrap it up in just like under 30 seconds, any recommendations that Daktari you will give to any education stakeholder watching us tonight about the state of the education? Any recommendations that you will give in under 30 seconds?
I will recommend that let us not only focus on the quantitative aspect of the education, but focus on the qualitative. The world out here is looking for problem-solving skills. The world is looking for people who are creative. The world is looking for people who will be game changers. The world is looking for an education system that will leverage much on technology and so many other things. Thank you.
All right, and also, Moses, your advice to key stakeholders in the education sector watching us tonight. Quite a number of questions streaming in, and there are some of them, maybe I can see they are key stakeholders. So your advice to key stakeholders in the education sector, what would you advise or recommend?
As I watched a video yesterday night of a road system in Japan, and most of the comments to that video were, we need to focus on an education system that creates solutions. We have very many problems, but again, these problems are an opportunity for us to shine. But the education sector or the education system in the country somehow produces people who do not really focus on producing solutions for the generation. I think there is a statement that many of us in our age group, we are very eloquent at whenever we are given an opportunity to express ourselves. Most of us are going to mention the problems that we face, but very few people are going to mention the solutions to these problems. And so I believe an education sector that produces individuals who are able to focus on the solutions to the problems that we have as a country is the best way forward. And so I believe focusing on an education sector that is more solution-oriented rather than creating people who will continue mumbling about the problems that we have.
Great. Indeed, such an insightful and gentlemen, on set we had Dr. Eliud Situma, who is an educationist. He is also a lawyer and also the executive director, Trinlab Consultants Limited. And also on the other side we had Moses Rono, St. Paul's University School President. We've had quite insightful sentiments about the new funding model, also about the new competency-based curriculum, and also very great recommendations to every education stakeholder watching us tonight. Asante sana, gentlemen, for creating time and being with us in studio. It's a wrap for us tonight. Many thanks to you, our dear viewer, for creating time and joining us tonight, the 20th day of February 2025. I understand we are looking forward to seeing Daktari and Moses some other time right here in studio. Also, many thanks for tuning in across our social media platforms on YouTube at KUTV News Kenya, on X at KUTV_Kenya. On the sign language interpretation desk during the news time was Sami Okello, and my name is Theo Masharia. We do this again next time, same place, same time. Keep it KUTV. Good night and God bless.